On Thursday at Battleford Court of Queen's Bench, the Crown and defence presented their closing arguments in the second-degree murder trial of Saskatchewan farmer Gerald Stanley. The Crown's primary argument is that Gerald Stanley is guilty of second-degree murder. He argues that when Stanley was confronted with a grey SUV on his property, Stanley fired 2 warning shots in the air and then deliberately walked up to the grey SUV, pointed his firearm at Colton Boushie, who was in the driver's seat of that vehicle, and pulled the trigger, killing him. If the jury is not convinced that Gerald Stanley had any intent to kill him, the Crown has also proposed an alternate theory, which was that Gerald Stanley unlawfully caused the death of Colton Boushie because he was carelessly using his firearm, and he presented a number of examples of how this was the case. He said Gerald Stanley didn't know how many bullets he put into his gun, that Gerald Stanley didn't know how many times he pulled the trigger, and that Gerald Stanley didn't properly understand what he needed to do in order to disarm his gun. Meanwhile, defense lawyer Scott Spencer told the jury that what happened to Colton Boushie was just a terrible, tragic accident, and it happened when Gerald Stanley was reacting to a home invasion, a very scary situation, and that Gerald Stanley did what any reasonable person would have done in that situation. If the jury finds that Gerald Stanley was within his right to do everything he did in order to defend his property, then they will come back with a verdict of acquittal.